Hey chess friends, we've got a fun video for you today in my opening commentary of round 4 of the Superbet Chess Classic, featuring many of the world's top players, including, for our first two players in the game, Nepomniachtchi playing with black against Wesley Soa's white. These two guys are on 2 out of 3, currently equal in the lead, so let's see how the game went. So plays a move knight f3, maybe trying to avoid some Grunfeld ideas by going c4 and delaying d4. But after d5, he shows he is quite happy to transpose back into the Queen's Gambit territory. And, well, so plays a move g3 to Catalan, much like we saw in the World Championship match against Carlsen that Nepo played, where he went for this line with b5 there as well. And we may recall that Carlsen played the move knight e5 here, just avoiding any preparation, but so plays the main line with e4, and we get to see what Nepo's idea was. Because in the past, they would play b4 and say, well, if you take c4, bishop a6, and black gets very good play with the pieces. But recently, the trend for black has actually been to go bishop b7, which at first glance might seem like a very weird idea, like you're just giving up the pawn, right? But the points after a6, black actually gets very good piece play for the pawn. After ba6, knight a6, queen c4. This is what happened in the game, by the way. We have bishop to d5, attacking the queen. And what we see is that if the queen moves to like c2 or d3, black will go knight b4, and it'll be a very nice outpost for the knight there, right? So white goes queen c3, but after c5, we notice that, well, white's extra pawn is not all that valuable. You know, it's a pawn on b2, right? Also, by the way, if you're enjoying the video, make sure like, subscribe. You know the drill. So here white plays the move bishop e3, which I think is a very sensible way to keep the tension. You're not just letting that knight get active with knight takes c5, but you're waiting for them to take you, and you go queen d4 and your knight goes to c3. So Nepo goes knight e4 instead, continuing to up the tension. Queen e1 sort of move that might look very weird, but of course the players have prepared it all with their computers beforehand. And, well, if you go to c1 instead, then you may have some problems after cd4 and rook c8 with the queen beyond the open file. Well, problems in the sense of proving an advantage. Obviously, you're not losing after such a move, but black would be reasonably happy. So we have knight b4. Again, black saying that it's not so easy for white to fully consolidate the extra pawn, when in a sense he is playing without the rook on d1. White plays move knight c3, realizing that, you know, if you do play knight c2, we have a very nice intermezzo of knight takes d5 to eliminate black's good bishop before we move the queen. Obviously, if they were to go knight to c1, we take e7, we take e1, and, you know, we get enough material, or more than enough material even. Black goes knight c3 instead, we have bc3, and, well, this is the way the game played. Knight c2, and the game is still being played live, by the way, as I am going through it. So, after cd4, cd4. I mean, this is a position where, it's sort of like a Marshall Gambit in some ways. Black has got the bishop pair as compensation for white having an extra pawn. And black has reasonably active piece play. I think if you go bishop to f6, I think that black should be able to hold just by putting pressure on the d4 pawn. But I think Nepo's next couple of moves were not absolutely the most precise. Like rook d8 is what he played very, very quickly, suggesting maybe he could still potentially in preparation, or perhaps he's just bluffing that he's very confident. And after queen f4, h6, I feel like white is somewhat better here, and I think it helps a lot that you can play moves like e3, keeping the structure very flexible, and also, in a way, just, putting the pawns against the opponent's unopposed bishop. In that case, I would give white a very pleasant edge. And I think that if you can, let's say, go e3, maybe knight e1, trade off the black bishop pair, and say that, well, I've got a knight against a bishop with the pawns on one side of the board, I think that, you know, white definitely has some winning chances to work with. It'll be interesting to see how the game goes, but let's move on to the next one here. Just bear with me one sec. So our next game is a very sharp one between Shakhriar Mamedyarov against the surprise packet of the tournament, Bogdan Daniel Diak, who is quite close to 700, in fact, on the live ratings, as he got a very nice win against Richard Rapport in the previous round. So the game went c4, e6, and also Diak is actually the other co-leader on 2 points, while Mamedyarov is in last place, or equal last place, I should say, with 1 out of 3. And yeah, the Vienna is a line that's been somewhat popular these days, you know, partly because of moves like b5, which is a quite creative way to play it as black. And also bishop b4, yeah, is a line too. Well, it's the main line even. Now, bishop c4, like there's this gambit line that exists, but white decides to go bishop g5. And yeah, black plays h6, a small shortcut compared to c5. You have take, bishop c4, c5. This is black's idea, even though white gets nice lead development. Black also does have the bishop pair, so black is really trusting his ability to be able to defend against the coming white attack. Now, a move like knight d4, it sort of would make it a bit hard for white to find a good square for the queen before playing rook d1. So normally they go knight e4 and they play it more dynamically, like this, queen e2. And bishop e7 just kind of a good prophylaxis against, a3 and also, keeping the options open. So rook fd1, and yeah, now the move queen a5. And I think that Diak is, quite well prepared, even though he spent some time thinking on some moves like h6 and playing castles earlier. The next move suggests that he kind of knows what he's doing. Where by playing rook d8, you're also just making it not so easy for white to play, like knight takes d4. Obviously, rook d4, knight c6 would kind of lose the pawn for white anyway. So this is why a3 is played instead. After rook d8, well, this position is very much... Well, it's quite provocative in a way to play this against Mamedyarov, because Shak really loves to play these kind of positions where you sack the pawn, but you get some very nice chance to attack black's king. And yeah, g4 is like a very nice idea, to go for g5, try to open up the black king this way. Though it's not feasible to do it just yet, because black knows to play like h5 and just keep the position locked up, but it's in the mix, let's say. With rook ac1, well, white is trying to discourage black playing queen to c7 to try to win the pawn on e5. But funnily enough, black actually plays it anyway. And the reason is that if white were to play bishop takes e6 here, then you just go queen b6, and you actually are kind of happy to get rid of that pawn, funnily enough. Because if bishop c4, knight f8, you're hitting with bishop takes g4, and the position opens for the bishop pair. So a very, very creative idea by black to see this concept. There are some fun lines where you go bishop f5, and you kind of sack the bishop for an attack, and maybe that was the way for white to play it. There are definitely a lot of options for white that are, well, very complex, of course, but certainly it's a position, where, well, let's put it this way, where the stakes are very much raised as such. But, well, white said he didn't want to, go for the piece sack, and he went knight g3, but after queen b8, I feel like black is the one who is probably a little better here, because you're not really getting in, like, h4 and g5 in time. Like, h4, you go a5 and start to weaken the queen side quite a lot. But if you play, like, the safe getting the pawn back, like, black goes knight f8, you just kind of unravel with, moves like b6, bishop b7, you trade off the rooks, and I mean, when the center is open, there's not much hope for white's attack to be successful, and I do think black is probably, if anything, a little bit better in this case. So far it seems like black is doing pretty well, and that, well, white's opening concept was not completely successful, I guess. I suppose a move like queen d2, queen f4, bishop d3 maybe is a better attacking try. But here as well, I think that black should be fine if he just maneuvers knight f8. As Bent Larsen used to say, when now on f8, they can never be mates. Our next game, meanwhile, is between Firouzja against Richard Rapport. And, well, Firouzja actually went below to 800 after his loss in round 2 to Jan Nepomniachtchi. And so Rapport is on like 1 out of 3 as well after losing to Diak, as I mentioned before. So it's kind of interesting to see how this game played out, where, Rapport is one of these players who tends to go his own way in the opening, and we see that here as well with playing the 4-knight Sicilian with knight to f6. And Firouzja, as one would expect, plays the most critical line, knight takes c6, e5, and this is really the main attempt to punish black for playing 4-knight Sicilian. And also the reason why I often see time off move order to avoid these e5 kind of ideas. But after queen c7, f4, queen b6, this is all very standard mainline fury. You're wanting to provoke f4, so you have knight e3 in some positions. White goes c4, attacking the knight. Black goes bishop b4, and yeah, it looks really weird, but you actually have to play king e2 in this position. Otherwise, e3 is a big problem for white. Black goes f5, and yeah, in the old days, they would go ef6, bishop e3, knight d6, this kind of thing. But those positions are kind of reasonably okay for black if he knows what he's doing. So Firouzja decides to go for a more closed position with the long-term space advantage. Bishop a6, king f3. Again, if you didn't know this was fair, you'd think like the players are completely insane, but this is actually a thing. We have knight e7, because after all, knight was under attack. Bishop e3, bishop to c5. Take, and yeah, queen d6 is quite an important move to be able to fix the structure in your favor. Fix d7 as a target. Obviously, queen e6, e6 is a pretty big improvement of the structure when e5 would become available for the knight. So black goes queen b6. And yeah, nowadays, normally white would play just b3. But then black gets in c5, and the sort of position is not so easy for white to prove his advantage. I mean, there are moves white can play like king g3, anticipating bishop b7, but it's not, let's say, totally convincing for white. So Firouzja's move of bishop g2 is kind of more ambitious, saying, well, maybe I want to go b4 and one turn later and try to fix the c5 point. In fact, the best bet for black may well be to play a move like g5, just kind of sack the pawn to, well, not so much to attack the king, but actually to try to lure fg5 and weaken the e5 point with knight g6. But black decides to play rook d8 instead, just trying to play more solidly. Maybe clear the way for knight to c8 as well. But it does seem like white did pretty well out of this opening after b4. Like, knight c8 was why black played it, but I feel like after queen c5, white is just doing very well. Obviously, take on c5 is just suicide, because then the bishop on a6 never gets out to the game, and the knight is absolutely horrible as well. So black frees himself with d5, but this is a position we have in the game now with knight d6, and I think that white does have some advantage here. The computer really likes the idea of playing queen e5 and basically going after the g7 pawn and threatening c5, but I'm not so convinced myself. I feel like the white king is actually very exposed with like bishop b7, and yeah, I don't really think this is necessarily better for white at all, in fact, despite what the engine says. I feel like a more human approach is just to play something like queen b6 and just say that, the ending is somewhat better for white. Your knight is going to come to c5 at some stage. You've got the outside majority, and I think white can claim some sort of small pull. Though maybe after c5, perhaps it's kept to a minimum. So, you have to admit, it's one of these positions where even though the engine much prefers white, I think it actually black is somewhat close to equality. It's only a little bit worse at this point, so I think they're a good chance for Rapport to hold the draw, but we'll see what happens. Next game here is between MVL against Caruana, and it looks like quite an interesting game. So let's see how it went from the beginning. It was e4, e5. I just realized you did see like the position coming up, but well, let's explain the earlier moves. Bishop b5, a6. And yeah, we have bishop to a4. So all very standard, and well, Caruana is perhaps more often known for playing like b5 and bishop c5, this neo-arc angle stuff. But for this game, he decides to play knight e4 and go for the open Spanish, which is also aligned with a very decent reputation for black. I mean, it used to be before that white was just better, but the modern engines kind of came up with ways to, to make this work for black in a sense. Like knight d2, knight c5, and, playing for d4 in some lines is kind of a, well, the approach, it used to be very sort of trendy, but now, people kind of realize that in general, like, black is doing okay here. White can try claim a small edge, but it's more practical, I guess, than objective. So white goes c3 instead, try and keep a little more tension. Means, for example, if black goes knight c5, you've got bishop c2. Or if they go bishop e7, like, you're not forced to go knight bd2 and transpose, but you get some other moves like bishop e3 or even queen d3. There are these different options that white has available, at least, to avoid the knight c5 and d4 plan. So black goes bishop c5, saying, well, by playing c3, you also gave black some extra options, and, well, actually here, queen d3 is actually a move that is, quite a serious try, where you go for bishop e3 and trade off the bishops. It's probably one of white's better attempts, actually, at this moment, but MVL decides to stick to the old main line, knight b2, bishop c2, and the reason I don't personally play this more often as white is I think this Dilworth line with, take f6 is just a very good line for black, simply. For example, the old way to play it was ef6, and, going like knight f1, but you end up getting this ending with like a rook and like two pawns against the two pieces, minor piece for white, where, white is inferior, a little better, but in practice it's just about equal in the end. So the main line nowadays is go like knight f1 and sort of let them get the two pawns in the center, but where you say you can kind of play around it and try to attack it. Well, anyway, the game went queen to d7. A move like bishop g4 and being knight e3, bishop e6 is not, let's say, the most human approach. Queen e7 building up is definitely more natural. If knight g5, bishop f5, it's not really leading anywhere special if we can trade off white's bishop pair. So white instead goes bishop g5, is developing this way, and it's quite noteworthy, by the way, that MVL had a very long think over bishop g5, which suggests that he was probably out of book at this point. But it's only a very human move, to try to bring the bishop around and try to attack this way, and you are preparing to connect the rooks. So rook a8, queen d2 played after another very long think. Of course, bishop h4 and bringing bishop around was also a candidate. And I think Caruana found a very nice move in d4. Honestly, it's probably still preparation from black. Because now after knight g3, I think this position is actually quite nice for black. I mean, knight g3 is a very committal move, in fact, because I'm pretty sure Caruana will play h6 at some point. And I mean, I'm guessing the idea is either to take, but then, black just goes queen g7, and it's not obvious to me how white is following up this attack in a certain sense. Or if the idea is to go bishop h4 and make them go g5, like, black can also just play dc3 and kind of say, okay, if queen d7, bishop d7, I'll be able to go g5 later when you don't have the queens to attack. And if queen c3, like, there's moves like b4, even knight d4 is a move as well to go for the attack. And feels like black is just kind of better to me. For instance, if you get, let's say, something like knight d4. Okay, it's easier to play, of course, when the engine is saying it's good, but like, knight e5 is not really working because of queen d6, or even queen d5, actually. And we kind of see why it's not really able to defend the knight, the queen, and the bishop all at the same time. So white would then kind of be prompted to go into this sort of ugly ending where, I think that with two healthy pawns and a rook for the two minor pieces, along with the fact you've got the initiative with g5 threats, I think black is probably just much better at this point. Or he definitely has some advantage, let's put it this way. So I think after h6, and actually Caruana just played it now, so black is just quite a bit better. And I mean, it's possible that Caruana could actually win this. We'll see how it turns out in any case. And the final game of the round was played between Dominguez against Aronian, and, well, at this stage, the players are both on 1.5 out of 3, just checking to make sure. And, well, Aronian, of course, well known for playing e4, e5 for pretty much his whole chess career as black. And so we have this Italian game, bishop c4, bishop c5. Very mainline, very strategic stuff. And normally black goes d6 and plays like some a6 or a5 move at some point to make some look for the bishop. But instead we have the move castles, which has its points as well. That, for example, you could try to play d5 and open up the center, and this is what Aronian indeed does. h3 is sort of trying to argue that d5 is not as effective, because then after take, well, you're saying that you've sort of not played c3, so maybe you could try to, use that tempo for the piece development more. And that's actually what happens in the game. Like, rook e1 is also a move, of course, in this position, but white goes knight bd2 and plays it this way. a5 is kind of an interesting choice, but the fact that players are playing instantly does tell you that it is preparation still. So knight e4, bishop b6, c3, and okay, it's sort of a normal enough kind of position, where probably the move that would seem the most natural would be to go king h8 and try to play for f5 or something. But f5 is also kind of a weakening move at the same time. Like, you are sort of leaving e5 a bit weak in such a case. So black would just play it like this, just, have a normal enough position, but I guess, it's also true that there can be some problems with d4 in some lines, and we'll actually see something like this in the game, in fact, where we'll buy a transposition, because black played the move f6 in the game. And if you're going to punish f6, I mean, to try to use the weakness as diagonal, since queen b3, bishop b6 is kind of nothing, this is why, or queen 3, knight c7 maybe is a better way, but the white is going to go d4, take. White plays a move rook e1, just kind of keeping black guessing for a move. But after king h8, we sort of get this familiar kind of position with cd4. I mean, compared to an IQP, I think that the differences do probably favour white in the sense that, well, this f6 move is a little bit weakening. The bishop e6, a5 doesn't somehow gel that well. And white's piece are on pretty normal squares for the structure, so bishop f5 is the position we have in the game, and I think that white is slightly better here if you just play to move a3. I mean, black can try different things, but in any case, you can just play like knight c5, let them take dc5, let's say something like this, for example. And you kind of see that white just has his bishop here, he's got a bit more space, and that basically gives white a small advantage. Now, it is very solid for black. I mean, there's probably a very good chance for black to try to hold this, but still, I mean, I think white has to have definitely some advantage at the very least. Computer's actually saying white is clearly better, which I think is slightly excessive, but I would still give white a preference here. Of course, rook e8 is not the only move that other ways black can play, but I do feel like white kind of won the opening battle here, and I mean, it's sort of an interesting question how black should play instead, because maybe the move d5 is perhaps not the best move order, and maybe this game kind of demonstrates why in that sense. But anyhow, those are sort of the games I want to share. Just do a quick review of the openings because it's kind of fun to do. And I mean, it's good also to get back into like looking at some top level games after not doing it for a while. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I would appreciate if you comment below with what was your favorite part of this video or some insight that really made an impression on you. I think you guys know by now I tend to prefer the more educational videos to the more entertaining ones. And while I don't think you can get 1,000,000+ subscribers just with a educational chess video, it's also not really the reason why I'm doing this either. But anyway, I will see you guys in the next video. So until then, take care.